This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So good morning. So we're here and we're going to start off by our looking at the seed chapter this week, as far as looking at, does a bear sow seeds in the woods? And in Alaska, shoot, yeah. And I just like that title. It makes me laugh. And you'll see here in the next few moments here, a 20-second video regarding a black bear eating what's called Devil's Club. So let's just take a look at that here and these berries. Now, you'll see here, if you can look at right over here on the stem of this plant, um, it's all has all kinds of thorns on it and spikes on it, so that if you were to grab at that plant, you would be in a little bit of discomfort from touching that plant for sure. Let's see here. Let's go to, so it says here, bears are essentially like farmers, said Tal Levy, an Oregon State assistant professor. By planting seeds everywhere, they promote a vegetation community that feeds them. Seed dispersal is a key component in the understanding of any ecosystem, Levi said. The study is the first instance of a temperate plant being primarily dispersed by mammals through their gut. Levi said the finding suggests repercussions for plant life when bears are removed. Okay, so knowing how important that the bears are an important integral part of the ecosystem and the movement of seeds, planting of seeds as a result of their scat. So let's just their feces. Brown bears or grizzlies flourish in size and numbers in the Tongass National Forest, America's largest, because they gorge on spawning salmon. As they wait for fish to enter streams, they eat berries. And Levi and graduate student Lori Harrer, the study's primary author, set up motion-triggered video cameras to detect what was eating berries. They collected bear DNA from saliva left on the plants after berries disappeared. So they did that. They recorded birds picking off a few berries at a time, but bears gulping them by the hundreds, which doesn't surprise me when you have watched any kind of bear videos of them eating and such. When brown bears shift to eating fish, black bears move into the berry patches. So both bears, through their scat, through their fecal material, disperse fruit seeds by the thousands, profoundly affecting what grows in the forest, according to the researchers. Rodents that find bear scat further disperse seeds, burying them in caches, a few millimeters deep. Levi said, if rodents lose track of the caches, there's a chance for new plant growth. And the same with when you think of acorns and squirrels in our area and such. They do the same type of a thing. So just kind of interesting, folks, to see that there, as far as I thought that was pretty cool. And let me just show you here as far as Devil's Club, right? So again, it's this, a term of botanical literature from the glossary, armed meaning protected with spines, prickles, or stinging hairs. Devil's Club is armed to the teeth. And you'll see here also, so you can see on these images to the right, see those little spines and such on them, right? So grabbing at them is not a fun thing. And you'll see here as far as also that they have these abundant berries, and this is what, again, primarily the bears are eating them and then spreading them out as far as with their scat is concerned. So pretty cool. And then what was the other? Oh, and then this article here. So again, talking about seed-bearing plants, right? So we're looking at conifers in particular here and looking at these cone-producing plants. So how trees survive and thrive after a fire. This is put out by the National Forest Foundation. And look here, as far as, listen to this for a moment here. Quite fascinating, interesting. Big or small, gradual or sudden, change rhythmically punctuates human life. And we get that, right? In the natural world, change is just as intrinsic and pattern-based. Seasonal fluctuations in temperature, shifts in sunlight, natural disturbances like fire are all part of nature's cycle. Okay, we get that. And so we're talking in particular, we're going to be looking at fire here. So, of course, no species is adapted to live in fire itself, but animals and plants can adapt to a fire regime. So a fire regime includes, among other things, fire frequency, fire intensity, and patterns of fuel consumption. So plants have a distinct disadvantage compared to animals in the face of fires, because are they going to run away? No, they can't, right? They can't run, they can't fly, they can't creep or crawl, right? but what they can do is they can adapt to survive and even depend upon regular fire. So from armoring themselves with thick bark to developing ways to protect precious seeds, trees have developed several fascinating adaptations in response to a predictable fire pattern. So the thick bark, fire-induced sprouts here, we're going to look at as far as, in particular, I want to move on to the cones and the seeds, okay? Since you'll see here, so environments where hot, fast-moving fires are frequent, some pine species have developed very thick, hard cones that are literally glued shut with a strong resin. These serotinous cones can hang on a pine tree for years, long after the enclosed seeds have matured. So those seeds within the cone, they've matured, but they're sealed up in this resin. Now, when a fire sweeps through the area, that intense heat will melt the resin. And what will happen is that these heat-dependent cones open up, releasing their seeds, and they're distributed by wind and gravity. And, they're going to fall to the ground, and they're going to be distributed by the wind. Examples of this fascinating trait of fire-stimulated seed dispersal include jack pines in the north central and northeastern United States, and Table Mountain pine. They grow in dry, rocky sites in the Appalachian Mountains. Log hole pines are also ubiquitous across much of the West, as are one of the first species to grow after fire because of these special types of cones. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. And how about this for fire-activated seeds? So those are cones that have adapted. Let's go here. So as opposed to these serotinous cones, which protect enclosed seeds during a fire, the actual seeds of many plants in fire-prone environments need fire directly or indirectly to germinate. How wild is that? These plants produce seeds with a tough coating that can lay dormant, awaiting a fire for several years. Whether it is intense heat of the fire, exposure to chemicals from smoke, or exposure to the nutrients in the ground after fire, these seeds depend upon fire to break their dormancy. Notable examples of shrubs with this particular fire adaptation include Rhamnacea, that grow in California chaparral, and other ecosystems of the American West. So a combination of factors has come to limit and alter historic fire regimes. This has had a cascading effect on which species are present in certain ecosystems. Without the right kind of fire regimes, some trees simply can't reproduce, and overall forest health can be negatively affected. At the same time, unnaturally severe fires can destroy forests, even those that have adapted to fire. So fortunately, land managers are realizing the value of reintroducing controlled fire in ecosystems where it has existed historically, embracing it as a tool rather than fighting it as a threat. That's a welcome change for the forests, trees, and other plants that depend on fire to thrive. How cool is that, folks, right? Science is cool. Science is amazing. Science is so fascinating, and just to see and to learn about how these trees adapt to these natural events that can occur, right, as a result of. So think of it in terms of, so it's not just like Smokey the Bear saying only you can prevent forest fires, and by leaving your fire unattended and throwing matches in the woods, whatever. But how about just the fact that we have lightning strikes, and these can cause, during a time of dryness and drought, can cause fires present within these forests and such. So pretty amazing, folks. So let's go to our chapter here on seed plants. So this is chapter 29. And you'll see here that we'll start off with 2 clades of seed plants. We'll have here the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. Okay, the gymnosperms we looked at as far as the conifers. These are the cone-producing trees and plants and such, and their relatives. And then the angiosperms, the flowering plants. So when we think of gymnosperms, we think of pine trees and such. We think of those that produce the cones. We think of these needle-type leaves and such, and also flat leaves. Know that also, okay? As far as gymnosperms, we'll look at that for one particular variety, the ginkgo. And then the angiosperms, the flowering plants, and we see them throughout. But know that the angiosperms also would be what would contain, like your grains and such would also be angiosperms, okay? And producing fruit and such. Fruit would contain the seeds that are going to be able to be spread throughout the habitat and allow for the ability to then reproduce the different types of plants and such. Okay. Let's see here. So we're looking at the gymnosperm. We're looking at the flowering plant. Okay. Let me just go back for a moment here and just. Okay, I thought I heard something. Yeah, okay. So caller, I'm just going to mute you. Okay, so here we go. All right, so here. All right, so the rise of seed plants and such. And so the seed, when we're thinking of seed plants, and so next week there we'll discuss regarding seedless plants, but this week we're focusing on the seed plants for chapter 29 here. And in our lab, you're going to see that the seed, the embryo sporophyte, is contained within. As far as food reserves are also present for the embryo, the developing embryo, and a tough protective outer seed coat. So when we're thinking of the seed, this is what's present, these different parts of the seed. And know that there are male and female gametophytes. Yeah, Aaron, it's okay, no problem. Yeah, no, I didn't mean that to be any type of, just want to, if I hear that in the background as I'm trying to teach, it kind of gets me out of focus a little bit there. So no worries, Aaron, you're great. And I'm glad that you're here. So thank you for attending. You'll see here as far as a pollen grain. So the pollen grain, right, there we go, as far as the male gametophyte, the egg producing gametophyte, the female is the seed. And so we're going to see how the cycles are taking place in order to be able to reproduce these seed variety plants, okay? Now you'll see here, as far as this is just giving you an example of different types of seeds and whether we're looking at, and too funny as far as the avocado. Do you all like avocado? Yeah, I have to tell you, for a while there, I really wasn't feeling it, didn't really like it so much, but now I really I enjoy it. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's not the greatest thing, but I've learned to really enjoy it because it is a healthy fat and it's really good good as far as in certain things and sandwiches and such, and pretty pleasant as you get used to it there. But you're seeing here as far as for A, the seeds of a pine, right? And you're looking at here as far as the seed coat, that outer covering. You'll see here as far as the nutritive tissue, and you'll see here also as far as the embryo. And so how it's protected, right? And you'll see here as far as with the dandelion. The dandelion, really, it's quite interesting how I know in my culture, as far as for our Italian descent, they'll use dandelions for different things, and as far as for eating, and as far as for like a salad, and as far as for the leaves, and also for dandelion wine, which I've never had, but I've heard about it. But you see here, as far as you've all seen these puffballs out on the lawn. If you haven't cut your grass for a period of time and it comes time for you'll see that these puffballs are there because they contain what? They contain the seeds. And how many of us have done this? We pick them up and we blow on them and watch the seeds start to disperse, which is cool, right? But like, how many of us really want dandelions on our lawn if you're growing your lawn as such? But it's just, yeah, hey, it's all good. Pretty neat though to see how they can disperse and they can go for quite a distance and be able to, those seeds can travel in the wind. And we'll see that the wind is a primary way of dispersing of the seeds. So look here, as far as innovations pave the way for the seed, right? So gametophytes with few cells and small overall size can be sheltered by the sporophyte's tissues. And so we're going to see here, when we think of megasporangia, megaspores, we're thinking of the female portion. When we're thinking of microspores or mycosporangia, we're thinking of the sperm producing, the male portion of the plant and such, in order to, you'll see here, heterosporous, right? Male and female plants produce sexually different spores. Okay, and we're going to see that as they come together, then that's fertilization, just as it is with the human, as far as the egg and the sperm coming together, and that creates a zygote. And there's we'll talk about haploid and diploid in a little bit there, but know that these are haploid, right? And that diploid would be when they come together, completing this set as far as chromosomes are concerned. So the female gametophyte, right? So we're looking at each megasporangium is cloaked in an integument or skin. We'll look at an image in just a moment here. Together with these two form an immature ovule, okay? So the egg-producing gametophyte develops within this ovule, and after fertilization, the ovule develops into a seed, and the integument becomes the seed coat. So here, what you're looking at here, folks, is that we have this integument. This becomes the seed coat, right? And here we have that megasporangium, right? So we said that the mega, think female. Micro, think male, okay? And, you know, don't go off on any tangents with that, but just that's how it is as far as the terminology is concerned. Seed enhanced reproductive success. You'll see the seed dramatically improves the likelihood that a new individual will develop and survive to reproduce, right? Because this is what's going on. We need to protect the seed, we need to disperse the seed, and then have it enter into the ground and be able to grow, right? And develop and survive to reproduce, right? So having that seed coat is really important as far as the protection of the seed. You'll see here that seeds may also remain dormant for months, years, or even millennia. And so as I'm thinking about this, right, so it brings me back to bacteria and their endospores, and how these endospores can contain the genetic material for the bacteria, and they can survive very harsh environmental conditions, right? Well, same here too with seeds can also, and we just saw that there as far as looking at the pine cones and such, and in particular, certain types of conifers have these pine cones and seeds that can survive for extended periods of time and waiting for the heat of fire in order to have them be dispersed and such. You'll see here sprouting only when, so the seeds that are remaining dormant, sprouting only when external conditions favor the seedling's growth. That's adaptation, folks. Right, that's the ability for adaptation to occur for the continuation of the species. Excuse me one moment, I'm just going to press pause here. Okay, all right, so let's move on. Here we go. So while evolutionary changes were producing the seed, other changes involving the microspores, right, for the male microspores, the male gametophytes, were giving rise to the pollen grain. And so the importance of pollen being the ability to actually then fertilize the female gametophyte, right? You'll see here, as far as the male gametophyte was reduced to a few cells, enclosed by a sturdy wall made mostly of sporopollenin. Right? You don't have to know that, but just know we're talking about the male as far as the microspores, as far as pollen grain is concerned. You'll see here that other modifications produced unflagellated, right, so no tail, non-swimming sperm. Over time, many different forms of pollen grains evolved, all microscopic and lightweight. And they're microscopic, they're lightweight, so that we can, the trees can, these conifers can release their spores, right, their pollen, out into the wind, and they can release a whole lot of them, right? Many of them, that they can, that just by way of the chance of that, yes, they're being released by the wind, and the fact that they need to come to the female cone and such and fertilize. When we release a lot of them, the chances are very high that some will make it to the female gametophyte. Now you'll see here as far as in comparison to the bryophytes, right? So these are the seedless variety of plants, simple, flowerless, seedless, green plants, example moss, liverwort, and we'll talk about them next week, need water for fertilization. So you'll see here that pollen and pollination permitted sexual reproduction free of external water. Okay, and so that's why we're making this comparison here and realizing that the pollen is being released, and it's being released into the air, and then, or by other types of pollinators and such that can be a part of this whole process of fertilization taking place. Here you're seeing the different types of pollen and the diversity that's present within the types of pollen. Kind of looks like a nose, right? That grass pollen grain kind of looks like interesting. Pollination, right? So pollination, you do have an idea regarding this as far as the transfer of pollen to female reproductive parts via air currents or on the bodies of animal pollinators, right? So that's also important, and realize that. So we have different types of birds and insects and such, and other animals and such can spread the pollen to the different female parts and such, and allow for pollination to occur, and then allow for fertilization to take place. Okay, so plants equipped with non-swimming sperm, right, so non-flagellated, and a way to deliver them to female gametes no longer required liquid water for reproduction, as in the case of the seedless variety of plants, the bryophytes there. This led to radiation into new, drier environments. So we would say they're terrestrial, there's land-based. Okay, and here you're seeing as far as what they would tell you as far as years and such. Remember, again, as far as evolution is concerned, and as far as their theory is concerned, that it's a matter of that it takes millions of years and many, many years in order for adaptation and changes to occur. Now, the types, so we have the gymnosperms, we have the angiosperms. So the gymnosperms, think of the naked seed plants, meaning that those seeds are not as protected, they're not enclosed in this protective enclosure as, say, the angiosperms have those seeds, and they're protected and they're present within the fruit and such, okay? So you'll see here as far as extent, species range from tropical forest to desert habitats, but most are dominant in cool temperate zones as far as the gymnosperms. So when we think gymnosperms, again, we think of those like the evergreen type varieties. We think of needle-like or scale-like as far as in their shape. So gymnosperms, angiosperms. Let's get a little bit of a comparison here. So gymnosperms, vascular plants, naked seeds, born on exposed ovules of the female cones. So know that there are male and female cones present in those conifers in particular. Non-motile sperm arise in the pollen grains, okay? So they're non-flagellated. The immature male gametophytes, they rise in the pollen grains, those immature male gametophytes, exclusively wind pollinated, okay, except for cycads. And we'll look at this today in lab as far as also in lecture here. The angiosperms, again, we're thinking of flowering. So if we think gymnosperms, non-flowering, we think evergreens and such. Angiosperms, flowering. Think that they have seeds that are protected and present within fruit, okay? Ovules in the ovaries that develop from carpels. We'll look at the anatomy of this in a few minutes. Double fertilization that produces an embryo, and the endosperm, which actually will help to feed the embryo. So seeds protected inside fruits, and nearly all land habitats and some aquatic. Okay. Now, I highlighted here, and you're going to see also over the next few slides that we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail regarding these phylum as far as the cycads, the ginkgo, gnetophytes, and the conifers. Okay, so primarily what we've been talking about so far as the conifers are concerned, those evergreens. So you'll see here mostly evergreen. I've highlighted what I think would be important for you to remember. Needle-like or scale-like leaves. Okay, when we think of the cycads, we think of shrubby or tree-like leaves resemble palm fronds. So we just had a couple weeks ago, for those that celebrate that, Palm Sunday. And so think about along those terms, okay? There are male and female cones present and in warm climates. And look at this, pollinated by wind or beetles, okay, cycads. When we think of ginkgo, all right, so there's only one living species present of ginkgo, right? The ginkgo biloba. It's a tree with deciduous fan-shaped leaves. And so we'll look at that today in lab, as well as also here in lecture. And then lastly here, as far as the gnetophytes, as far as woody vines or shrubs in desert or tropical environments, okay? And we'll talk about that double fertilization also, okay? And as far as you'll see here, that we'll look at and discuss as far as monocot and eudicot in just a moment there, which is also considered a dicot. So you'll see here the cycads, all right? Flagellated sperm that swim to the egg. So this is unique for the cycads. Short stems, palm-like leaves. Poisonous alkaloids occur in various cycad tissues. And so these alkaloids, these chemicals that can be produced, can really have a devastating effect on animals and such. So we'll look at that. Here's an example of a cycad. You see the unique shape and variety. And I want to show you here. Let's see here. So this is Encephala artis, okay? Large female cone and fern-like leaves present, okay? Here we have, as far as the ginkgo is concerned, Ginkgo biloba grows in warm temperate forests in central China, okay? You've all probably heard of, as far as supplementation is concerned, and I'm gonna ask you to do a little research regarding that, and I'm gonna show you in just a moment here regarding Ginkgo biloba. Sperm are swing flagellated cells, fan-shaped leaves, resistant to insects, disease, and air pollutants, right? Nursery propagated male trees are planted in cities because of this fact that they have this this resistance and such. Pretty wild. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to, let's see here, we're going to go to this site for just a moment. All right, and so what you're seeing here, I just giving you this just so that you can see claims that are being made and some that are supported and many that really need more research done. But 12 benefits of ginkgo biloba plus side effects and dosage, and you'll just see here as far as, and so know that maidenhair is another term used for the tree. So an AKA ginkgo biloba, also known as the maidenhair tree, okay? Tree native to China, have grown for thousands of years for a variety of uses, okay? And so you'll see here as far as antioxidants, and here's the leaf that's present. It's pretty unique and pretty cool looking leaf, is it not? Right? Very, very unique, very different from what you're used to seeing here at the Northeast as far as leaves are concerned. And so I'm just going to show you here as far as then, so the claims of powerful antioxidants, fighting inflammation, improve circulation and heart health, reducing symptoms of psychiatric disorders and dementia. So improve brain function and well-being. This one is the one that they make speculation a lot of. But you'll see here that many of them, as far as the summary is concerned, and you can go to this and look at this, and I highly recommend you do, just quite interesting. Some research shows that ginkgo may improve mental performance in healthy people, but the data is inconsistent, and more research needs to be done for many of these claims and such. But just know that that's what is out there for that. So I just wanted to give you that, and I'm sure that many of you have heard of ginkgo biloba. So that'll be part of your lab today, as far as I'm going to have you do a little very, very brief research regarding, and just give me a couple paragraphs regarding the ginkgo biloba. So you'll see here as far as, here's cool. This is pretty cool. And I have to, I haven't been over to my office. We had a flood, and we had issues with the new carpeting and different remediation for what happened to that in the office and student services. So I have a bunch of fossils and such, and so I have fossil leaves and ferns and such, and as well as other types of fossils present. And but yeah, so I don't have a ginkgo though, but just cool to see that. You'll see this, so it's been around for a long, long time, and you'll see here as far as the unique shape to it, and this is what the tree looks like there. And I would, yeah, so pretty cool stuff, and beautiful mountain in the background, right? Nice picture. Gnetophytes, right? So there's 3 genera, right? So Needham, Ephedra, and Welwitschia. Now know that Ephedra you've probably heard of, you might have heard of, and growing in the desert regions and such. And so what I've done right here also with this one is I want to go to this site for a moment here. Let's see here. Go out of this here. Okay, there we go. All right, ephedra, and its application is sports performance. Another concern for the athletic trainer, maybe. So you'll see here that the term Ma Huang herb, otherwise known as ephedra, has gained widespread popularity as an ergogenic supplement with the sympathomimetic alkaloid ephedrine, as it is its primary active ingredient. So it's really it's a stimulant. Okay, know that. And you'll see here as far as they're talking about, so they'll use it for performance enhancing, right? Type of supplementation. Okay, so not a drug per se because it's natural, but still they're, you know, they do work with it here. Let's see here. It appears that the risk associated with Ma Huang far outweigh any possible ergogenic benefits. Thus, it is extremely important that athletic trainers educate athletes on these issues so they can continue to perform an optimal level in a safe and healthy manner. And so there's some absolute issues as far as this is concerned, as far as supplementation, and it can lead to some pretty nasty side effects and such. But that's all I'm going to say right now, because I'm going to give you a little bit of time today with your lab to do a little research regarding that. Okay. So ephedra. And then here you see examples of these plants and such. And look at those neat seed pods here, right? Pretty interesting looking for sure. Okay. And here what you're seeing is that as far as the gymnosperms are concerned, having the swimming sperm and non, right? As far as then you'll see here, as far as the relatedness, as far as the clades are concerned, seeds and exposed ovules, right? Gymnosperms. And then you're seeing here as far as the angiosperms. And so we're looking at these as far as the different varieties of whether they're non-flower or flower producing types of plants, but they are all seed plants. And then the conifers, and this is where we're going to spend most of the time here today, as far as, and what we've already talked about: pines, spruces, firs, hemlocks, junipers, cypresses, redwoods. These are the softwoods. These are the conifers. These are that specific phylum. You'll see here needle-like or scale-like leaves, male and reproductive, female reproductive cones. So the male cones, right? The microsporocytes, right? So again, think in the male, micro, think in the female, macro, okay? As far as the two microsporangia develop under each scale. So the scale, as far as those cones, are made up of these scales. That's what we'd call them. Spore mother cells undergo meiosis and give rise to these haploid microspores. Okay, so we have these microspores that are formed. They're haploid. They would be diploid when there's fertilization that takes place. The microspores undergo mitosis and developing into this pollen, okay, the pollen grain. This is important. Now, two cells of the pollen grain will form this degenerative cell and the tube cell, right? And these are all part of the process of actually entering into the female components and allowing for fertilization to occur. Air currents move the pollen grains from the male to the female cones. So the female cones, they also have these scales. They bear these ovules, okay, very analogous to the ovaries and what's present within the female human anatomy, okay? Each containing a spore mother cell, this mega sporocyte, right? So mega, micro, and mega. Not macro, sorry, I misspoke there before. Mega sporocyte for the female portion. When conditions are right, the megasporocyte undergoes meiosis and then mitosis. So meiosis first, creating these haploids. Only one of those haploid megaspores will survive and become the mature female gametophyte, right? This mature female gametophyte is massive cells, and it has these archegonia, which contain an egg for each of them, right? And we're going to look in just, yeah, here we go. So we're going to look and see there as far as the cycle is concerned. So pollination, the pollen grain develops into a pollen tube, grows toward the female spore mother cell, and then we're going to have fertilization take place. So sperm form in the pollen tube, stimulate maturation of the female gametophyte and the production of the eggs. So the embryo will form, a pine seed is shed from the cone. That seed coat is covering and protecting the seed, protects the embryo from drying out, and there's a food reserve present there in order to nourish that developing embryo. And so we're seeing here as far as folks, so that haploid stage and the diploid stage, right? There's the zygote. So when we think of the female and the male gametes coming together for the human, right? Haploids come together, fertilization, diploid created, that zygote, and then we end up having the embryo develop and so on and so forth for the human. Well, same also here for the conifers here as far as for the pine tree. And so you see here, here's the seedling that is being produced as a result of, so fertilization by one sperm nucleus forms an embryo that develops into a seed. The other sperm nucleus degenerates. And so then we have here, eventually the seed gives rise to a seedling that grows into a sporophyte. Okay? So male and female cones being a part of this process, the male and female gametophytes, the micro and the mega sporangiocytes here come together for meiosis, mitosis, and then developing and creating pollen, which will then fertilize the egg. Now, angiosperms. So that's the gymnosperms. We're looking at now the angiosperms. So thinking of the flowering plants. Again, flowering plants, fruit present, protecting the seed, okay? You'll see here as far as the parts of the flower, the carpel is what surrounds and protects the ovules and the seeds. The fruit surrounds the embryo and aids the seed's dispersal, right? So very important. And as we saw there earlier, as far as the bear is concerned, eating those, the fruit, the berries, and then will in turn move away from that area. In their scat will be the seeds, and that will be dispersed whether by little small rodents, animals, or just being present within the dirt and such, and can develop into another plant. Now, look here as far as angiosperms, flowering plants, approximately 90% of all living plant species, right? So that's quite remarkable, folks, that there are the majority of the plant species would be considered angiosperms. The most widespread and ecologically diverse plant on Earth, growing on dry land, wetlands, fresh water, and the seas. And here you're just seeing some examples of, and this is quite cool here as far as the Indian pipe, parasitic angiosperm. I've never seen that before. That's pretty new to me. I think that's pretty cool. But the beauty of flowers, right? And that these plants that produce these flowers, and they're seasonal, and when they do this, right? In comparison to the evergreens, which are always green and always, being involved in the cycle of dispersing and creating their own kind, right? It's the flowering plants that only seasonally will produce their flowers. Origin of flowering plants there. So flowering plants appear suddenly in the fossil record without a fossil sequence that clearly links them, to other plant groups. So quite interesting. So, and really reconstruction of the earlier flowering plant lineages from morphological, developmental, biochemical characteristics produced conflicting classifications. So it's really hard as far as in the fossil record to come about as far as evolutionary understanding of the origin of the flowering plants. Okay, so there's still much that we don't know, folks, just so that you know that. Yeah, Nathaniel. So, okay, so Nathaniel, why don't you tell us, could you put on your mic for a moment? So I don't really know anything regarding the medicinal purposes of that. Do you know off the top of your head, or I can look that up and I can share that with everybody later on. All right. So Indian pipe is a cool plant, really interesting use as a medicinal supplement. So Nate, do you know in particular how it's used? Can you respond or no? Yeah, no problem. Wait a moment here. And it's okay, no big deal, no problem. But yeah, so I know that many of these my phone, oh, it doesn't work, so I'll have to type a response. Okay, no problem. When you type it, I'll read it out loud to everybody. Thank you. No problem at all. I thank you for your input. So let's see here. So that we're going back to that Indian pipe. Okay, right there. And we'll wait for Nate to let us know some information regarding that. Okay, so here you're seeing in the fossil record as far as a type of angiosperm, this Archifructus sinensis. Now, as far as classification is concerned, so monocot, eudicot, we're considered dicot. Monocot embryos, single seed leaf, right? The cotyledon, cotyledon, and pollen grains with a single groove. Whereas the eudicots are the true dicots, right? Dicotyledon, 2 cotyledons with pollen grains with 3 grooves. So knowing the difference between the two, and you can see an example I've shown you here as far as with the monocot and the dicot. There's another image I'm going to show you here as far as just giving you a little bit regarding the mono and the dicot. But that's all, just knowing the definition is fine, okay? So here we have as far as different 5 clades for these angiosperms. The earliest branches are the basal angiosperms, earliest branches of flowering plant lineages. You'll see here, so magnolia, so magnolias we've heard of, laurels, avocados would be within that branch of the lineage there. You'll see water lilies are present, anise, right? This could be used as far as a spice and such. Other spice plants as far as for peppercorns, nutmeg, cinnamon, right? I don't know if any of you like to cook or bake and such, but really nice that we can use, really, I would tell you that chefs, people who are really good cooks, that do well, they really understand and know how to use herbs and spices and make sure that they use enough of them also. Most people when they're cooking and such, and so I have a background in professional cooking and such, know that most people don't put enough spices and herbs into their cooking and such. And so that's the difference between someone who has a good understanding and knowledge regarding these herbs and spices can really make a difference in their cooking and their presentation. Good stuff. You'll see here this, the closest living relative of the first flowering plants, they say, as far as from the evolutionary theory is concerned. So Ambarella trichopoda. So let's take a look at that here. So I've provided an image for you, pretty interesting looking plant. And here, let's see here. Here we go. So here we're looking at as far as the Ambarella right here, as far as within the different clades of the proposed phylogenetic tree for flowering plants and such. And so you're seeing here seed plants. And so we have here the angiosperms, and then what you're not seeing here is, and well, yeah, you are seeing here, right, the gymnosperms here, okay? Okay, so here would be a eudicot pollen grain. Here we see the examples of magnolia from anise, see the pond lily, and pond lilies are, the water lilies are really pretty and very neat to see in ponds and such, and being a part of that ecosystem. You'll see here the Ambarella present. Okay, so eating the plant is not a good idea. If I'm not mistaken, it causes hallucinations, but when used properly as a medicine, let's stop for a moment here. My mother has described as being set apart from your pain. Interesting. So it can help with pain management. So your body is still in pain, but it is as if you are outside of your body and not actually experiencing. Interesting. It's kind of used as a pain reliever in small doses. Not an expert, don't eat them. My mother used when she had shingles, if I'm not mistaken, which experiencing shingles, folks, can be a very, very uncomfortable and painful disorder as a result of if you've had ever been exposed to or experienced chicken pox. It can lay dormant the virus within your body and within your nervous system, and in particular when you're under stress and your immune system is weakened, it can come out and present along a dermatome, an area of the skin, and it really can be quite uncomfortable. So very interesting that it's used as far as pain management is concerned. Yeah, thank you, Nate, very much. I really appreciate that. Thanks for your input. Okay, yeah, thank you, bud. So monocots and eudicots, as far as, look at this here, folks. So giving you just a little bit more information regarding this. So 60,000 species, 200,000 species of the eudicots or the dicots. So the monocots, including grasses, palms, lilies, orchids, major crop plants, so wheat, corn, rice, rye, sugarcane, barley, the grasses, okay? And you don't really think of them as flowering plants, but yes, they are still part of that variety. We think of the dicots, we think of flowering shrubs and trees, non-woody type of plants, cacti. We think of the eudicots. And here you're seeing as far as and the wheat, right? And seeing the grain there, seeing the tulips and how beautiful they are. This orchids are just a very interesting looking flower also, very unique. Roses, this bush lupine, very cool, pretty flowers. So again, the monocots, the dicots, or the eudicots. So flowers, specialized shoots for reproduction. So the flower contains an angiosperm's organs for sexual reproduction. Okay, so the flowers have specialized parts: the carpel, the stamen, the petals, and the sepals. Excuse me one moment, I'll be right back. The challenges of being at home while you're doing your teaching here. So, so the anatomy as far as the carpel, the stamen, the petal, the sepals, we're going to look at that and talk about that in production and regarding the angiosperms. Okay, not all flowers have all the parts. Okay, so grasses can contain different types of parts and not all of them. But we'll see here that this is very important to understand that. So for the female portion of the plant and the flower, we're looking at the carpel. For the stamen, we're looking at the male. And you can see here as far as the MEN present within the stamen, that term, so think of the male part, male component. Then the petals and the sepals we'll talk about in a moment there, but the sepals are really involved in protection. What's going on here with my, there we go. And the petals are involved in attraction of pollinators to the flower, okay? So the female gametophyte is the carpel, okay? And the carpel contains ovules protected in an ovary. The stigma is the sticky portion. The style is the stalk. And yeah, I'm just saying this, but to be able to look at it, we'll see it in just one moment here. The male gametophyte, think of the stamen, right? And see that men in the term there. So the male portion of the flower. It has a stalk-like, also like similar to the style. Style's thicker. The stalk-like filament and the anther, which contains the pollen, contains these 4 pollen sacs. And so having this understanding, and so this could be something that I would definitely, as far as the flower parts are concerned, put this on the test and ask you to identify structures and such, all right, or describe a structure and have you identify it. The petals, again, attract the pollinators. The sepals protect the developing flower bud. So let's take a look at this here. So as far as anatomically, so we're looking at the carpel is all of this structure here. This is the female portion. The male portion is this structure right here. So we have the stamen with the stamen is this whole structure. We have the filament and the anther. That's the male portion. The anther contains those pollen sacs, so pollen producing and releasing. The carpel is this whole structure here, also known as the pistil. They'll also use that term, right? And so we have the stigma. The stigma is really where we end up having it's sticky and it will attract the pollen. And then the pollen will then enter into the style, right? Which is this tube, which will then enter into the ovary, right? Which will have then these ovules present where we will have then the interaction between the pollen and the female component to actually then produce the seed, okay? And understand that this component here, the ovary and such, can develop into a fruit, okay, containing seeds. So double fertilization takes place. I mentioned to you this earlier here. So one, in flowering plants give rise to both an embryo and also an endosperm. So the embryo, the sperm in the egg cell, as we're familiar with this, produces a diploid cell, right? That's fertilization one. Fertilization two will have this sperm and two polar nuclei coming together and forming nutritive tissue. Right, this nutritive tissue, this food supply will be for the embryo, the developing embryo. Okay. And here you're seeing an example of and what's taking place. You can look through that and read through that. I'm not going to ask you for the step-by-step. I will never ask you for the step-by-step regarding the life cycles and such, but knowing about certain components and having an overall understanding as far as what's taking place and what's occurring as far as you'll see here as far as haploid and diploid stages, and as far as with just the double fertilization, you should know that that's going to produce this embryo as well as this endosperm, which is a triploid cell, right? The sperm and two polar nuclei, which will be the nutrition for the developing embryo. So the term angiosperm represents seed vessel, refers to the carpel, right? That's that female component, okay, where fertilization triggers the development of seeds from the ovules in the ovary, okay? So that, again, that carpel is the whole component, also known as, aka the pistil, and it's where the fertilization triggers and develops those seeds from those ovules. Again, these are those little ovules, okay? An ovary develops into a fruit. See, I mentioned that to you before. There encloses the angiosperm seed within, and so then it allows to protect the seed and the embryo it contains, and it helps to disperse the seed. And we talked about, I mentioned to you the component of pollinators, being able to take the male component, the pollen, to the female component. So pollinators, insects, bats, birds, other animals transfer pollen from the male floral structures, right, from the anther, right, producing the pollen, to female reproductive parts. Over time, plants have come to have distinctive flowers, scents, or nectar that correlate with specific co-evolved pollinators. Okay. So you'll see here, and this is quite interesting. I thought this was really pretty cool here as far as nectar sipping bats and moths, right? They feed at night. They pollinate sweet smelling flowers with white or pale petals, because it's really not, that's not what's really attracting the bats or the moths at night, right? It's more of the sweet smelling flowers that are attracting them, not really the appearance of them. Yet you'll see here long, thin mouth parts of moths and butterflies. And if you've ever seen them eat, it's very interesting and very cool to see that tongue come out and such. Match the length of narrow floral tubes or spurs, right? Red and yellow flowers attract birds, right? Because they have good daytime vision, but poor sense of smell, in opposition to the bats and moths at night. Beetles or flies may smell like, you'll see here the flowers are pollinated by them that smell like rotten meat, dung, or decaying matter. And this is quite interesting. And I've seen a video regarding this. I've not actually been up close and seen these certain types of plants that have this smell, but I've been told that it's pretty disgusting and pretty interesting. But beetles or flies are attracted to it and can pollinate. Bees. And bees, folks, the importance of bees in our ecosystem and the protection that we should take place as far as these bees are concerned, really. They see ultraviolet light, visit flowers with sweet odors and parts that appear to humans as yellow, blue, purple. And their importance as far as, you'll see that they go to a flower and they end up having all of this pollen present on their legs and such, and then how they're able to then transfer it from one plant to another. Here you're seeing a hummingbird. Folks, I've never seen a hummingbird at a flower per se up close, but I've seen hummingbirds at hummingbird feeders at my home and such, and at other friends' homes and such, and hummingbirds are the coolest little birds. They are just so tiny and amazing in how they're able to bee pollinators and how they're getting the nectar from the flowers and such. Here you're seeing a bat and a moth here and such. Pretty cool. Polyploidy. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, as far as I don't know if anybody's taken a genetics class yet, but when we're thinking of haploid and diploid, we know what those represent, right? So haploid, half a copy. So again, the gametes, the sperm and the egg, have a haploid set of chromosomes. When they come together, we have then a diploid set, and so there's two pairs of 23 chromosomes for a human. Polyploidy results when one or more extra copies of the haploid genome are produced during whole genome duplication. It's common in flowering plants, possibly because of the self-fertilization or asexual reproduction. In humans, it produces severe birth defects. I added this here, and death, folks. So this like an XXX usually doesn't survive as far as that's concerned, as far as polyploidy. But you'll see here, as far as in plants, so seedless watermelon, bananas, these varieties that have been genetically manipulated, right? Peanuts, blackberries, strawberries, sweet potato. Just pretty interesting to see that this is where polyploidy can take place and not affect the fruit and the plants in an adverse way. So up above here, you'll see as humans began domesticating seed plants, so they're guessing around 11,000 years ago. Today, the grass family, arguably the most important seed plants, and reason why, producing the cereal grains, providing the majority of calories for humans to consume, right? Very important. Also, you'll see here the pea family variety and how they are close to the grains and the grasses as far as the ability to feed mankind, right? You're also seeing the potato and rose family, the cassava, right? These are all very important as far as nutrition. The rose, not so much, but although there's rose water that they create for baking and cooking in certain cultures. So you'll see here as far as rice, wheat, corn, examples of, right? Also, plants involved in essential building materials. So trees, very important as far as for production of building materials. But we're also using stone, we're using brick, we're using other components, metal, right? As far as beams are concerned, and as far as I'm so bad as far as construction is concerned, so I can't really tell you. But just I know that they use other structures, but wood is absolutely important. And I know that also wood has gone up in prices as far as for getting like buying a 2x4 at a lumber yard, much more expensive than it was within the past year to 2 years. You'll see here as far as trees provide other materials such as paper, cardboard, fiberboard, resins for commercial use. Angiosperms are also their source of fibers for clothing and other products. So you're seeing here as far as cotton, you're seeing as far as for lumber, for building materials. Medicinal purposes, and so thank you, Nate, for mentioning regarding the Indian pipe and such. And so you're seeing here, nearly 25% of medicinal drugs are organic compounds that are derived from seed plants, serve as chemical models for, or they serve as the chemical model for which they will produce synthetic versions of the organic compound, right? You'll see here as far as some seed plants produce alkaloids, can be used in medicine or as anti-cancer drugs. Alkaloid, so I'm just giving you the definition here. Any class of nitrogenous organic compound of plant origin pronounced physiological actions on humans, so they can exhibit these, humans can experience these. So think like morphine, quinine, as far as for pain management, as far as also for work with malaria and such. Poisons, atropine, strychnine, all right? These are alkaloids, examples of. Plants also produce psychoactive substances, and so this is also what was mentioned earlier there as far as that Indian pipe, and so this can be for both legal and illegal use. And right now we're looking at as far as CBD is concerned, and marijuana use as far as it's been approved for recreational use and such. And so know that whatever your thoughts are on it, right? And we all have our own thoughts, I'm sure, on that. Just understand too that if you can be under the influence of alcohol, can you also be under influence of certain legal type drugs, but can they affect how your performance as far as driving is concerned, or other handling equipment and such? something to consider for sure. And so you'll see here, and so common legal drugs as far as so like tobacco and caffeine and such, and you see here periwinkle. All right, folks, I'm going to stop the recording.